Hello everyone and welcome back to the new news. I am Paul and I'm going to be your host once again for this evening. I hope that everyone is doing just fine and dandy. I hope everyone's safe and I hope that everyone's families are safe. Today we have a lot of information in the world to cover. There's been some interesting developments, of course, in the Middle East as there have been recently, but also some other interesting developments here in the country of Ukraine, which has been our focus for what has seemed like forever at this point. This war continues to drag on, which is just absolutely dreadful. And as we've been getting more and more information about the war, it seems things are just not as they should be. At least the forces on the Russian side appear to be conducting significant amounts of war crimes against civilian populaces, and no side is foreseeing that stopping anytime soon. So, as we talk about these things, I want to remind everyone that in the description below, in all of this human suffering, we do always maintain donation links for Ukraine. If you want to support the war effort itself, Come Back Alive is a great organization. They were founded in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and parts of the Donbas, and they actually send equipment, whether that's plate carriers, plates for their plate carriers, helmets, optics, equipment. They send that to Ukrainian troops and territorial defense forces, keep them armed, and they keep them safe so that way they can come back alive, hence the name. Other than that, there are lots of humanitarian groups down there. We have things such as the World Central Kitchen, Doctors Without Borders, and several more. And if you can't give a lot, give a little. Every little bit helps. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dig down into the news. And obviously, we're going to be starting with Ukraine, as we normally do. Today, in Ukraine, despite my hopes and wishes, there have been a lot fewer yellow dots today, meaning things that are, quote-unquote, good for Ukraine. There have been a lot of not very good news coming out once again today. So, with a rather heavy heart, we start to dig into this topic. And the first thing that we come across is that the best term that I could use to describe the war crimes going on inside of this country, because at this point, it is so blatant what Russian forces have done that it's fact. At this point, it's so blatant that these are now facts. And so as that, it is now news to say these things and to have an opinion on these things. And that is the best way to describe this, is that no village spared. Similar to in the vein of spared no expense, Russian forces have left no village spared. Today, in the what appears to be the village of Buzova, more war crimes have been evident. The city has been destroyed, including the small maternity hospital there, which was hit by armored vehicles, as Russian forces said that they, quote-unquote, believed that there were snipers hiding in the building. And so we have some footage of that today.
В 17-х роках тут, поки будували табір Азовець, тут діти розміщувались. Знайшов фото з цього місця, але місце не впізнати тепер.
Позаду мене згарище, яке ви бачите. Раніше, декілька років, тут була прекрасна, чудова будівля, в якій декілька років відпочивали діти. Тут був дитячий табір Національного корпусу в Київській області. А зараз він виглядає ось так, після того, як тут місяць побули москалі. Нічого страшного, відбудуємо, так само, як і все інше. Найголовніше це те, що окрім згорілої будівлі нашого табору, позаду ціла купа згорілої техніки москальських орків, тому на їх трупах і побудуємо нову Україну.
Відбудуємо.
Obviously, it doesn't stop there, though.
Тобто, коли був обстріл, то були всередині пацієнти, так?
Ну, це була моя палата, тут була ванна навпроти, тут народився Остап. Ну як, він тут народився, але ми лежали тут і на дивані.
Ну це ж було коли? Вже рік тому.
Так, це була моя палата.
Ці дві палати.
От як вона виглядає. Це...
Те, що справа, і так, лівіше. Це вже їхня фото.
Тобто вони прицільно сюди мітили?
Так, вони думали, що тут заходить наш снайпер, тому сюди і стріляли.
А звідки це вони стріляли?
З дороги.
З Житомирської траси, так?
Прямо.
We're going to go ahead and cut it there for you. But, as you can see, that was a maternity hospital, a very rather small one, but we didn't actually see it before the war here. That maternity hospital. Before the war came to Ukraine's door here. Very different scenes around the city. But that only emphasizes even more of what we saw up near Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, Chernobyl, and many other cities at this point. And as we move on over to Bucha, we can see that the scenes are getting worse. Well, I don't think they could get any worse at this point, quite frankly, but they continue. And the cleanup has begun. We heard several days ago that 410 bodies had been removed, safely removed. That process continues. It's believed that many of those bodies have been booby-trapped, but the International Court of Justice, which is part of the UN, does have its docket as a pending case of genocide, of allegations of genocide committed by Russia in Ukraine. It is a pending case, and we can see here why. That is from today, the cemetery in Bucha. This is just Bucha. And here we can see number 15 on the docket, allegations of genocide under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Ukraine versus the Russian Federation, on the International Court of Justice. The crimes here the trials are expected to be, if they're able to bring it to proper trial, these are expected to be similar on the level of the Nuremberg trials that were committed or that were held after World War II in regards to the Holocaust. That is how bad the situation in Ukraine has gotten, and that is how bad and horrendous these war crimes have been. They have shocked world leaders. They have sparked international outrage, and in the scenes, we haven't even seen them all. We can't show most of them here. They are that horrific. They are that gruesome. And it's being broadcasted at this point almost 24/7, and it doesn't seem to stop. There are already rumors in Chernihiv and Sumy Oblasts of similar findings to what we have found in this area. The footage has not come forth yet. But these rumors so far have led to physical evidence being true, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. And we've talked about Borodyanka a couple times in the last couple of days. We've shown the destruction of Borodyanka. However, today it has come out that over 200 civilians in the city were killed during either the occupation or the initial invasion that came through the city. The shelling has been that bad. Today we have drone footage here of the destruction of the city. We've seen it a couple times from the ground as cars have been passing through the area, but this broader scope really brings in to a much bigger understanding than just driving down a couple of streets. We can see there wasn't anything spared. Once again, that term of no village spared. Big or small, close to the capital, far away from the capital. Areas still under occupation are suffering the same kind of circumstances in the east. We know that this is absolutely abhorrent and horrendous, and we expect more to be coming from areas that have been under occupation for much longer. And there's also an English-speaking reporter who was on the ground in Borodyanka talking about what he was seeing today. So we figured we'd go ahead and give that a watch for you guys here as well to really drive home what's happening in this area.
We've made it to the town of Borodyanka, which is northwest of Bucha, and somehow, I didn't know it was possible, but the devastation is even worse. I mean, look at that, that's an apartment building, just sort of chopped in half. The mayor says when this invasion began, Russia actually sent its jets over this town, that they bombed it from the sky, knowing full well that there were civilians here. And the great fear is that as Ukraine retakes more and more land on the way up towards the Russian border, that they'll discover more atrocities, possibly even worse than the ones we've already seen, because Russians were here for that much longer. The other thing about this town is that all you really hear is the sound of crows. There are very few people, because there's nothing for them to come back to. There's nothing really for people to have survived here. We've made it to the town.
And that rings very true for a lot of areas that were under Russian occupation. There just isn't really anything to come back to. And we'll get to a little bit of more on that here later. However, an interesting development out of Kiev today, and that is the fact that that there is now a new legion being formed. We've heard rumors about this. We've seen the flag protests that we've aired here as well. And today they had a press conference in Kiev regarding this to bring down some of the fears that were being brought up because of this and concerns. And that is that the Free Russian Legion has been formed. This is a group of Russian troops who have defected over to Ukraine. They wish to fight for Ukraine. And that new Free Russian flag that we have shown that we were talked about regarding some protests earlier is now their official symbol as a military legion fighting in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side. And so we actually have a video of that press briefing here. This is actually brought to us by one of our members on our community, which they send us tons of stuff anyway, but this one was very special, and I thought this was worth bringing it up. So thank you to the community member, you know who you are, who actually posted this, and I was able to take a look at it and see what you were talking about. So without further ado, let's take a look.
Интерфакс Украина из Киева начинает пресс-конференцию с участием российских военных, которые захотели воевать в составе легиона «Свобода России».
В первые дни наше подразделение было практически полностью уничтожено, так как оно попало под шквальный огонь. Так я попал в плен. Находясь в плену, я осознал, что на самом деле это никакая не спецоперация. Идет полномасштабное вторжение на территорию другого государства с целью установления своей власти, своего режима.
Да, были пропаганды по поводу, что здесь неонацисты и все тому подобное, наркоманы, там убийства детей насилуют. Продвигаясь в колонии, мы видели все зверства путинского режима, мародерство, выносили из домов и хотели увезти с собой как триумф на родину. Также видел убийство мирных граждан, разрушение детских домов, больниц, роддомов, в которых прятался мирный народ Украины. Также видел, как российская армия использовала заложников в лице мирных граждан, как живые щиты.
Находясь здесь, я понял, что здесь нет никакой специальной операции. Здесь идет самое, что ни на есть настоящая война против мирного населения. Мне удалось побывать в городе Буча. Я своими глазами видел те ужасы, которые российская армия там творила. Я своими глазами видел маленьких детей, которые в буквальном смысле слова были разорваны. Это были маленькие девочки, которым на вид не было даже и 10 лет. Это были маленькие, ни в чем не повинные дети.
So obviously an interesting development. I will admit some of it did seem a little scripted just because of the verbiage being used, which brought up a few concerns from me, and I want that to be known. However, there were rumors prior to this and that a Russian legion was being formed to fight for Ukraine as well, of volunteers from POWs and defectors. And this more or less, regardless, kind of confirms or does confirm that that is in fact happening. And so we may see them on the front here soon. I know that there is a large offensive being conducted in the east and in the south. The east more so in the Donbas and the Kharkiv regions. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But this is a very big leap forward. We have seen protests in countries around the world, including Slovakia, Bulgaria, Czechia, Slovenia. We've seen protests around the world of Russian citizens who no longer believe in the government in Moscow. So very interesting development. It's very interesting to see that that flag is now official in some way, shape, or form, and not just an idea. And as we turn our attention a little bit more northward, we can see in Chernobyl that some of the rumors that we had heard, we have been alluding to this, and we have said this a couple times recently regarding the fact that Russian forces supposedly dug trenches in the highly radioactive Red Forest just inside of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and one of them has purported to have died, and another 75 are purported to be extremely sick with radiation poisoning. There has been some evidence to support those rumors today, and that is that there's now drone footage showing those entrenchments by Russian forces in the Chernobyl exclusion zone in the Red Forest. So we do know for a fact that Russian forces here did dig trenches and earthworks and fortifications in the highly radioactive Red Forest. Now, this area is called the Red Forest because in 1986, during the Chernobyl nuclear accident, the fallout was so radioactive that it actually turned the forest red as it killed all of the plant life in the area and irradiated it. What makes Chernobyl safe, or what did make Chernobyl safe, as well as Pripyat and the rest of the exclusion zone to go to, is the fact that on the surface, the radioactive levels had become low enough that really any dangerous radioactive material was below the topsoil. The tanks and heavy armored equipment and the digging of trenches and shelling in this area has now churned up that topsoil, and that has exposed the radioactive dust and debris and soil underneath, basically causing this area to now be irradiated again, and it will probably no longer be safe to go to areas like the abandoned city of Pripyat or Chernobyl for the near future. On top of just unexploded ordnance, now though that now ecological disaster and that nuclear disaster of Chernobyl is rearing its ugly head once again, and once again Russian troops are likely going to die as a result, much like the Chernobyl liquidators did. However, despite these two interesting developments, we can only go back to bad news today, and that is in Chernihiv, and that is there's been a new cemetery, or a new extension of the existing cemetery in Chernihiv, that was dug specifically to bury all of the dead from Russian shelling. And we have a video of that here. Each and every post is a victim. And we can safely say this is likely not all of them, as more will still need to be pulled from the rubble. And I'm sure in some of the occupied areas around Chernihiv, more will need to be discovered as the days go on, much like they were in Bucha, Irpin, and the other cities. There's been enough evidence today to support the fact that Russian forces have pretty much all withdrawn from these areas. We held some areas as being still labeled as being held by Russian forces, as it was supposed, or as it was alluded to, that there were still some Russian forces operating in limited capacities in these areas as they were withdrawing. We have now no longer heard anything about that. And as some of the rumors and things that we are hearing from the ground that we can't confirm entirely yet with certainty are coming from these areas, we now know that it's safe to say that Russian forces are now within their own borders within these regions, pretty much all the way down towards Kharkiv. So we have now moved that border up along the Ukrainian, Russian, and part of Belarusian border. There was not a lot of news out of Sumy or Kharkiv today. We do know that conditions are set for Russian forces currently to launch a large offensive in the Kharkiv region. However, none of that has come out today. However, as we go to Severodonetsk, which is in the Luhansk region of the Donbas, we can see that there was some video evidence from CCTV cameras today. It was recorded by a third party, and that's how we found it, of the bombing and shellings of the city. And we don't know if anyone was injured or killed yet. More than likely they were. However, this video doesn't show it, but you'll understand why I bring that up in a moment. This comes as the Russian forces continue to pool more men and material and really ramp up their offensives here in the Donbas. This has been their new shift in military focus. It's been clearly stated by them it is. Their movements in the north and the more troop movements and forced conscription here in the south and the east prove that. And so not only that, but today Russian jets were spotted flying over Luhansk, and it seemed that either between, after, or before they conducted their sorties, possibly on the way to bomb Severodonetsk, we can see that they put on a little bit of an air show for the separatist and Russian forces located within there, give them a little bit of a morale boost. So we have a video of that. And unfortunately, I don't think either of those ones were shot down, though we do know that Ukraine has been shooting down a significant number of aircraft and helicopters during the war, so I'm sure they will be added to that count eventually. On top of this, today, this has been widely reported by other media sources as well. The Ukrainian government told everyone in the east and along the southern and eastern fronts to evacuate or risk death. This comes as a result of, one, the intensifying fighting in these regions, but two, in the event that some of these areas become occupied by breakthroughs of the Russian forces, which is still a possibility. It is a big concern that similar atrocities such as Bucha and Irpin, which has rocked the world at this point, could once again happen in those same areas. So to prevent loss of life and try to prevent some of these atrocities from happening, the Ukrainian government is just telling the civilian population, if you are in the east and you can, leave immediately. If you don't, you risk being killed. And with that, we're going to move on into Mariupol. There's been some developments in Mariupol. Some stuff you just can't make up. No matter how wild a story is, there are some things that even you just cannot make up. And here's a video today that shows that the TikTok army, aka the Chechen forces, once again, they have things that you just can't make up. They do things that you just can't. It's impressive to me. We saw them denazifying doors yesterday. This just comes after they've denazified every empty house in the occupied city, occupied areas around the city. And today, we see them showing off some rather unusual skills that they seem to have picked up. Now, we don't know if they raided a toy store or a museum, or what, but rather interesting, to say the least. The interesting way to, I don't know, they're not really even in combat, so they shouldn't have too much to be stressed about, because we haven't actually seen Chechens in action this entire time. Any video that's come out has been a propaganda video where they've been shooting at nothing. They've either shot at empty residential buildings, cleared empty residential buildings, as it was shown on RT, which is the state-run news network. They have shot at empty houses, shot at doors, shot at windows, none of which was at any point in time actually occupied. Like, no one was shooting back. We've never seen a video of someone shooting back. We've even seen evidence of where there's just a dude watching them film down the street towards where they're shooting. Where it's another Chechen soldier just standing there like, yes, this video will be fantastic. And we see him in the video. So we know they're just there more or less for propaganda. And more propaganda continues. But however, this one is not from Chechen forces. This is actually from the state-run worldwide news network of RT. RT, for those that don't know, if you see the videos, they normally have a watermark over them. RT is a Russian state-run news network that operates globally. There's even a division here in the United States of America, which is where I currently am giving this report. And they essentially have done nothing but push out Russian propaganda. Obviously, they're a state-run news network. So in general, when you're going through and looking at videos, if you see RT anywhere, you can generally disregard them. However, this is a special case, and this is because this is a straight-up propaganda video. It's obvious that's a propaganda video. We're saying it. They even say it's a promotional video. It's a promotional video for their armed forces, except they're using Russian grad launchers firing rockets into the populated city of Mariupol as their subject for a promotional video for the Russian armed forces. The indiscriminate bombing of a civilian populated area, which in and of itself is a war crime, is now being used as a promotional video of the Russian armed forces. So we're going to go ahead and take a look.
Как принял?
Now that is terrible. And to add to that, today there were rumors that this was happening. It initially started as a rumor. We later one of our researchers and translators also received confirmation from the city council of Mariupol and the mayor of Mariupol, who is able to get messages out on some message boards that we have as sources, and also from the Defense Ministry of Ukraine to confirm that mobile crematoriums are currently in use by Russia in the city of Mariupol. We've heard about mobile crematoriums funneling convoys of Russian forces prior to this. However, the concern is right now that they aren't there for Russian forces to hide their losses, as it was initially thought with forces up in the northern regions, but instead the international outcry that came from what was left behind previously in areas such as Bucha and Irpin. Now the Russians may be trying to burn everything they can get their hands on to help to try and cover up what is suspected to be one of the most horrific atrocities of the 21st century, on par with some of the most horrific atrocities that happened during World War II. I mean, things like the rape of Nanking, China, which is considered one of the worst atrocities that happened during the war, right up there with the Holocaust, right up there with the amount of civilian casualties suffered in areas such as Leningrad and Stalingrad. And so they have now brought in mobile crematoriums, and the fear is that they are going to try and cover that up. Because the current estimated death toll, depending on the source that you look at, conservative figures have it at 5,000 civilian deaths in the city. More liberal numbers have it at about 10,000 deaths in the city of civilians. This does not include forces fighting in the city, such as the Azov Battalion or the 503rd Ukrainian Marine Battalion, or any of the Chechen DPR, separatist forces, Russian forces, etc. And as I said, there a lot of this stuff we get as rumors, and there's later confirmation of some of these things, so we post it. Today we're going to post a rumor that we're hearing, and I want to make it known that this is a rumor that we have heard, but we think that there is some significant evidence to back it, just because of what other things we are seeing. And that is, it is currently believed that Russian forces are taking any fighting-aged male that is left in, that has not been killed in the occupied areas of Mariupol, and forcefully conscripting them to fight in the battle on the Russian side. So if you were lucky enough to survive to this point, the Russians are going to take you. If you are, if fighting male age, they're going to take you and then turn around and have you fight to take the rest of the city, in which case you may be killed, or they may kill you if you refuse. So that is not confirmed. I want that to be known. It is not confirmed, but that is what we have heard. And considering the other things we have heard that have now been confirmed, there's a track record and a precedent for these things, and I would not be surprised as there's later confirmation by other sources or other news stations that have other sources that we may not have on the ground there, that confirm that this is indeed happening. So be on the lookout for something about forced conscription in or around Mariupol. And the Russian propaganda doesn't stop. Today in Enerhodar, we saw some pretty big protests in the area. But today there was a promotional video by state news media, Russian state news media, of not only the Russian but also the Soviet Union's flags flying over the city of Enerhodar. So there's a video of that where you can go ahead and take a look. The city of Enerhodar, which has been, for the most part, relatively untouched after it was taken, at least from what we can tell. There has not been any significant bombardments or anything. Part of the reason being is that we watched live, and a lot of us in a lot of places watched live, when one of the largest nuclear power plants, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Enerhodar, was taken by Russian forces, who they really didn't care about what they were hitting. They actually hit one of the reactors. It was luckily had been brought down. It wasn't currently being used because it was getting retrofitted and getting upgraded and receiving necessary repairs. So there wasn't any nuclear fuel in the reactor. The fire was put out. And it did not spread to other reactors. It did not, but they did take the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant located here, and so as a result, there's pretty big international outcry. We've seen some protests in Enerhodar. Some of them were ended rather violently, but besides that, from at least what we can tell so far, from the footage coming out of there, Enerhodar has not been completely ravaged by war yet. That could change as Russian forces may be pushed here in Kherson, and they may be losing their grip in this region as a whole in the future if things go in Ukraine's favor. That could change, but as of right now, besides the initial destruction at the beginning of the war, Enerhodar is relatively untouched for a Ukrainian city. And partially because of the nuclear power plant, and partially because a lot of the civilian populace there is very vocal about what's going on, and there's been a lot of video evidence of protests coming out of there. So there hasn't been much of a chance for the Russian forces to do much of anything in that area. And speaking of Kherson and the front here, there's been some small changes to this battle line here. As the front lines have shifted a little bit, we saw some interesting shifts. Seems that they're actually cutting off Kherson and other parts here in this front and driving a wedge between them. We can see that they've pushed back towards Nova Kakhovka here in the bridge there. It's supposed that they are mining the bridge at this location to blow it. However, Oskorivka was liberated by Ukrainian forces. They officially announced that today. So that's the only development in the front. We hope that this is the first burst of developments. There has not been a lot of developments in this area. Usually speaking, when that is the case, is because Ukrainian forces are on the move and Ukrainians are not wanting to disclose their locations and their movements so that Russian forces can target them and accurately predict where Ukrainian forces are moving towards. They know they're moving towards Kherson. However, all that we really know is it seems, and I cannot guarantee this, but it seems that Russian forces have had a wedge driven between them. That is quickly closing between this strip here along the Dnipro River and Nova Kakhovka and the city of Kherson. So hopefully more developments will come out in the next few days as some of those later successes that have happened over the last few days come out into public knowledge. And we'll be able to share those with you. But with the string of bad news, it's good to end on a good note there in Ukraine with another liberated village. And that is actually it for the Ukrainian portion of this stream. Ukraine is... there hasn't been a lot of good news this week. There's been a lot of shockingly vile, unbelievably evil and sadistic things that we have seen come out of this war so far. That has been abhorrent. Once again, very shocking. You really lose. You could not come up with enough adjectives to describe what is going on in this country in some of these areas. So it's very frustrating to me. It's very frustrating to a lot of people who are on the research staff. I know it's frustrating to a lot of you. Once again, in the description of the video, we do have donation links that we have vetted for going towards humanitarian aid and even one towards the war effort. We do know, we reported a couple days ago, the World Central Kitchen was actually delivering, I think, 6,000 kilograms of food, and they cooked 600 meals, hot meals. Professional chefs that are donating their time cooked 600 hot meals in the area of like Irpin, Bucha the other day. So we actually added them to the list. Come Back Alive, if you really want to support the war effort and Ukrainian troops themselves, that is there. We verified their credentials and everything and verified them. So if you can't give a lot, give a little, but there's a lot of terrible news coming out of here. So I just want to remind everyone that those are there. And so that way we can hopefully put a little bit of good back into what has just been a terrible, terrible, indescribable situation. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the international news. And we always try, we've seen a lot of stuff coming out of Belarus. We had some stuff in Mizir yesterday. A lot of stuff has come out of Gomel, which is a big staging area. And we've even had some stuff coming out of Russia. Today, that is not the case. So we go ahead and move down to Georgia, in which we see that there are protests against the atrocities that Russia committed. So they're protesting in support of Ukraine at Georgia's parliamentary building. We actually have something for that here. So they pose themselves as in a similar fashion to the bodies that were found in the Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel areas northwest of Kyiv. We saw this as well here in Bulgaria, in Sofia, on the very steps of the Russian Cultural Center. And so now there's a much larger group here in Georgia doing the same. This comes as those images have been broadcasted worldwide of the abhorrent and blatant war crimes and atrocities committed by Russia. So I'm sure we'll see more of this as groups continue to organize and prepare for protests around the globe. In Lebanon, the other day, we reported on the fact that the country was declaring bankruptcy. Yesterday, we didn't see any repercussions immediately following. Today, we do. And that is the fact that at least some of the population has already started to strike and protest, and there's starting to be some unrest in the nation. The garbage collectors went on strike today, and the streets are filled with garbage and refuse, and there's no one going to be picking it up. And there's actually a video of it coming out. We'll take a look here. These are not small amounts of trash. This is Beirut. This is a huge city, and it's going to pile up, and it's going to pile up very quickly, and that becomes a sanitation issue, a safety issue, a health issue, and many other things. So that has begun. Other unrest, I'm sure, will follow as other groups continue to once again organize themselves. However, the country is declaring bankruptcy to the World Bank, and the nation is broke and can no longer pay off any of its debts. So how that is going to be settled, because normally there is a bankruptcy case that follows where some debts are forgiven or they are reduced, we'll have to see. That information has not been forthcoming. Neither has any of the other unrest currently ongoing in Lebanon. As we move into Syria, Syria has had a lot of developments lately. A lot of stuff from the Kurds and the PKK, which is the Marxist Kurd group in Syria, Syrian armed forces. We've heard about attacks at a U.S. military installation in Deir ez-Zor province. Here, as we move up towards Aleppo in the northern Syria, we have seen that an unknown gunmen actually killed 5 pro-Turkish militiamen in northern Syria today at a checkpoint. We don't know who is behind the attack. It was probably one of the other rebel forces. To give you an idea, the situation in Syria is the melting pot of people who hate each other. You have the SDF, you have ISIS, or ISIL in Syria. You have the Turks, you have pro-Turks, you have anti-Turks, you have PKK, which is separate from the other Kurdish forces, which is the YPG, YPJ, and the YPK. You have the PKK, which is Marxist. You have the Syrian armed forces, the Russian armed forces, the United States coalition forces, the Poles, the Czechs. It's a ridiculous group, and it's almost impossible to follow who controls what and what they're all doing. And so a lot of times the information we have coming out of here is rather general. No one really knows who the attack is because it could be any number of groups. And that continues, that same kind of line continues here with another unknown group of unknown attackers on a highway who blew up the car and killed Colonel Hassam Jihad, who is a colonel in the Syrian armed forces, today just south of the nation's capital in Damascus, which is government-held territory. There's a lot of rebel groups that are fighting the Assad regime, which... to give you a little bit of an easier understanding of the region, this area is called the Middle Euphrates River Valley. This is really the defining point. Everything really south of that is Russian and Assad government control, and they have free reign to do what they want. North of this line here is where you will find the Kurds, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are also known as the SDF. The United States, the Polish, the Turks, and all of the Western coalition forces that are supporting ongoing efforts will be up in this region. That's this area where there's a lot of green land and arable land for farming is really going to be that defining crossing point. So if that gives you a little bit of an easier understanding of the region, I myself was in Syria in 2017 and 2018, so I have a little bit of understanding of what's going on here. But an unknown group did kill the colonel of the Assad regime here, and we actually have a photo of who this guy is. Now, the Assad regime has taken flack from a lot of international counterparts. They are backed by Russia, and there are Russian forces here, and they were known to have used chemical weapons, including chlorine gas, against their own citizens when the civil war in Syria began. And that is ongoing. There has not been a lot of reports of continued chemical weapons usage, but places like Aleppo were almost completely bombed to the ground. Much like the scenes of Mariupol today, Aleppo several years ago was a very similar situation. We have nothing out of Iraq today. There is no follow-up on what was going on in Diyala province from yesterday when an unknown attacking group threw an IED and blew up a house of a local engineer just northeast of Baghdad. But same thing for a lot of this region. Israel, there has been a lot of developments, which is kind of weird. We've seen a lot of big international news coming out of here, and we've also seen some Islamic State attacks. Islamic State attacks over the last 2-3 days have really died down. There was a lot of violence earlier in the week, but it has died down a little bit, except for one thing, that he may be part of the Islamic State. Yesterday, we reported on attack in Mashhad at a Shiite, which is a sect of Islam, at a Shiite shrine in Mashhad in Iran. The knife attack ended up killing two people, two Masalas, who are religious figureheads within the Shiite religion, and they were. And one was severely injured. The attacker was detained alive, and today we have gotten his identity, and his name is Abdul Latif Muradi. He is an Afghan national of Pashtun and Uzbek descent, and prior to his attack, he released an online video which he essentially talks about how he does not believe in the Shiite religion and how they do not believe in the true God and all similar extremist rhetoric, though his ties to any extremist groups, such as specifically the Islamic State, who they believe he is tied to, has not, or his other motives he may have, has not been definitively identified by the authorities at this point. I'm sure that will change over the next coming days. as more information comes forth and as he probably talks a little bit more. But we do have a video. We won't play it all, but this is his video that he did post prior to the attacks.
آیا غیر از الله سبحانه و تعالی کسی دیگر غیب را می‌داند؟ کلا، هیچ کسی غیر از الله سبحانه و تعالی از غیب آگاهی ندارد. عالم الغیب الله سبحانه و تعالی هست، نه امام، نه حتی رسول الله صلی الله علیه وسلم، حتی.
Gonna cut it there. I do not play videos like that very long for good reason. Same thing with Islamic State videos. We'll show some of them like we did with them pledging their allegiance, but we won't show all of them just because no one really needs to watch that for very long to get the idea of what's happening. In Afghanistan today, we've seen some recent resistance movements going on. We do know of Ahmed Massoud, who is fighting in the northern part here in Afghanistan. I believe actually in the region we'll be talking about here very shortly. There's also another resistance movement that announced itself publicly yesterday in the Kabul region. They may be behind the attacks at the Currency Exchange Center and on a Taliban patrol. However, today, with some very interesting developments, might I say, the Taliban are ramping up their operation in Baghlan province, Afghanistan. This is one of the regions that is resisting Taliban control. The resistance actually maintains control of the province itself. The chief of staff and the deputy defense minister of the Taliban Caliphate did go up there today personally to oversee the operations going on. They're bringing in more reinforcements, including, interestingly enough, air support. So that confirms the fact that the Taliban are now using some kind of air assets in their arsenal from that they have captured from both the Afghan military and the U.S. military upon exit of the country, as well as other coalition partners. They probably also have similar supplies coming in. We do know Pakistan has been not necessarily backing the Taliban, but they know that they have it. They've turned a little bit of a blind eye to them, minus some Taliban fighters of different beliefs in their country. They have turned a blind eye to what's been going on in Afghanistan in the last 2 decades. So we'll go ahead and take a look. There's a couple of pictures here. That is one of the ministers. I could not tell you which one, but that's either the chief of staff or the deputy defense minister. Here we can see some of their armored vehicles and some of the fighting currently going on in this province. Afghanistan's very interesting terrain-wise. Some of it looks like you could be in the Rocky Mountains. Very mountainous, very beautiful if there wasn't a war going on there. Very secluded areas, such famous places made famous by offensives there, such as the Korangal Valley. Reach that, and then there's also large swaths of desert and even some woodlands and plains which make up that country in different areas. And here we actually have a video of Taliban MI8s operating in the area as well. So that confirms the Taliban are currently using aircraft and at least helicopters in some capacity for their military. Which is something that was suspected, but we didn't know if they had anyone who knew how to properly operate them in that kind of capacity. In Islamabad today, we have some more information. Pakistan is now seeking some security contracts with China. This comes as General Qamar Jahid Bajwa stated in a speech today that the U.S. had hindered efforts to modernize its armed forces with Western materials. This includes a deal that they had with the Turkish military to gain some of their helicopters and purchase some of them and license them. However, the engine in their helicopters was actually American made, and the American government said no, we will not license the engine, which means that they would not be able to get replacement parts, etc., for maintenance in the deal. And so now, because of this, Pakistan is now going to look to the east and look at China to possibly bolster and modernize its military through what is believed to possibly even be cheaper Chinese defense contracts and licensing. This is something that China has been doing here. We've seen it in Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and other parts, Bhutan. So it's something that they now seem to be expanding their influence even further and starting to grow into the Middle East at this point. So we'll go ahead and take a look here.
Our military cooperation with China is growing because we are denied equipment from the West. Many of the equipment which were deals which were concluded have been cancelled. So what do we do? I'll just give you an example. We bought T-129 helicopters from Turkey. It's a very good machine and the deal was signed. It's a defensive weapon. It's a gunship. But the engine was of American origin. So the Americans refused to give the third party certification. So what do? Either we wait or go somewhere else. Either go to Russia or go to China. We will prefer to maintain a balance.
Interesting enough, this comes as as there has been a little bit of turmoil here in Islamabad and in Pakistan. The Prime Minister had a vote of no confidence against him by the parliament, which was then dissolved shortly after they met for that. The president dissolved after the Prime Minister, who essentially is backed by the president at this point, refused to lose his power, and he's made a lot of anti-American rhetoric. We saw protests in the region against the United States, and we've also seen, however, the military, which at this point has remained neutral. The military in Pakistan has a lot of power within the government and within the internal dealings of the nation. Which is why you see a lot of military officials making speeches publicly on issues. And the head of the military appears to stay neutral and has even said that they have a good relationship with the United States and good contracts with the West, and they are currently still in support of the West. They have good relations, which is contradictory to what is being said at other parts of the government, especially the Prime Minister's office. So far they've remained neutral. They haven't interfered, but now we have a contradictory statement from the military and other part of the military saying something contradictory to what the currently commander or the highest, I think, ranking general in Pakistan has already stated. So, interesting development. It may be seen as a shift, but we'll have to see. In Yemen today, we can see that the 2-month ceasefire is holding. However, it is not perfect. There has been some areas that have still seen some fighting going on within the region. There's been small military operations throughout the region today. However, that has the ceasefire, the 2-month ceasefire that began on Saturday, is still upholding. However, these breaks in the truce are really becoming a grave concern for the UN envoy that's trying to broker peace and stability between the Houthi rebels who are currently fighting the Saudi-led coalition in the country of Yemen. The war has been ongoing for years now, much like it was a result kind of at the same time as the Arab Spring, and it continues now. It now continues with ongoing fighting inside of Yemen and also in Syria. In Algeria today, we see that one of the country's wanted terrorists was found. However, he was found dead. He was found in a grave in the southern part of the nation. Along with his body, they found a large cache of weapons and munitions, including a Strela anti-aircraft, basically missile launcher. The Strela is what is essentially the Russian version of the Stinger missile system that the U.S. has used and has sent to places such as Ukraine during this currently ongoing conflict. We also sent them to Mujahideen fighters in the late 80s that were currently fighting in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union's invasion of the country to great effect. It was one of the reasons that Russia had to pull out, because they could not continue to sustain losses to their air force and their helicopter fleets in the country, and they became so aggressive in their tactics they resorted similarly to bombing entire villages and wiping out entire populations. But we can see here that indeed there was a lot found. That is a Strela. It's missing some of its components, but his grave was found in the country. So, one less terrorist they have to worry about. In Peru today, yesterday we talked about how Peru was putting in a curfew. This is because there's been a lot of unrest because of food and fuel prices in the country. That is a result of a dip in global economics caused by the ongoing war in Ukraine. There's actually some interesting reports that came out today that saw a 2.8% decrease in the global economic growth in the past 30 days or this past month since the war began. And that is impacting countries all over the world. We're seeing rising food and fuel prices, and even in many countries, inflation rates because of this. Peru is no different. In fact, these rates and these problems are probably exponentially worse in countries that have who are less economically or food stable. And as a result, to bring down some of the unrest in the country of Peru, they placed a curfew yesterday. The government did, and as well, there was a protest on the Pan American Highway in Peru that ended up becoming violent, and one person was killed. Another 16 have been injured as they were fighting with police officers in the country. Past that, we do not have a lot of information on what is ongoing or other protests currently going on in the nation, though we can safely assume that there are some. Today in the United States, there was another interesting development, and that was something that was spotted on a highway in Phoenix, Arizona, just outside of Luke Air Force Base. And these are some very weird images. There was an oversized truck that was carrying some kind of fighter aircraft or jet aircraft. We don't know what. However, it has a very interesting design. It's not one that we can easily identify. It does have the Delta V wing. However, it's got interesting nose cone designs with nose fins. And it has that raised tail section. So we're not quite sure what's going on there, but obviously there's something happening outside of Luke Air Force Base. So an interesting development. Even if we don't have a lot of information, it's something worth taking a look at. Maybe now that the cat may be out of the bag, someone will have to say something, but neither base officials or the U.S. Department of Defense has anything to say on the matter. And as we move, and we're going to move back into Europe a little bit here, Spain actually criminalized the act of protesting outside of an abortion clinic and or harassing someone and or harassing somebody who has been using an abortion clinic or the healthcare workers at that facility. This comes as there's been a lot of protests worldwide and a lot of controversy on the issue of abortion and the right of choice and so on and so forth. We're not going to get into any of the politics here, but today Spain did criminalize the act of protesting outside of an abortion clinic to give those people some space, some relief, and they've also criminalized harassing individuals that both use those facilities for those purposes, and also the healthcare workers who work at that facility, as they have become growing targets as the political situation regarding this becomes more and more polarized. And to move into the UK and the final interesting news of the day, we've had more interesting developments than necessarily bad ones. A canyon of fire was discovered on the sun. Now, a canyon of fire, it's 12,000 miles deep. To give you an idea, it's a chunk of the sun that has basically blown away into the wind, and it's caused what's called a solar wind that hit Earth actually this morning, and it caused it kind of threw off Earth's magnetic fields. So over the next few days, since the magnetic fields are weakest at the poles anyway, now that those have been messed with even more, some of us, if we're lucky, will actually be able to see the aurora borealis, or also known as the northern lights here. They're going to become either more visible and more vibrant, or you're actually going to be able to see them a little bit further south as those magnetic fields are kind of messed with. In the broad scheme of things, those solar winds could be very devastating if just right when they hit Earth. This one, on a scale of 1 to 5, this one they said was about a 1 or a 2. It wasn't that major, but it could actually, if it was bad enough, could actually knock out electrical grids on the ground. And even if it was less severe, or not as severe as that, it still could significantly disrupt satellites and stuff currently orbiting the Earth and their electronics. So your stuff like GPS, so a lot of the internet services, and a lot of your phone services for cell phones would actually go down as a result. So, but today wasn't that bad, but we are going to get some of the cool effects off of it. We do have a picture of the 12,000 mile deep canyon of fire that they discovered. There it is. It's huge. They actually took photographs of the sun today in the United Kingdom, where astronomers actually discovered this at one of their telescope sites. So it's pretty cool. It's interesting, and we'll have to, and I'm sure we'll probably see a little bit more of it as the aurora borealis. Those northern lights are going to be shining very vibrantly and very a lot further south than they normally would. I'm sure some of you may even get some good pictures. So I hope y'all enjoy that. I'm glad it's not going to disrupt our lives like a really bad one could, but I'm happy to see we're going to at least get the cool effects of it. And that actually today wraps up all of the worldwide news that we have. So I appreciate everyone that's worked on this project so far. The staff have been an amazing help. They've done amazing things. And they have, without this, it wouldn't be possible. So make sure you give your support to the staff. I want to remind everyone once again that in the description, we do have donation links. Once the channel is large enough to become monetized, once this channel is large enough to become monetized, we'll actually have a fundraiser on every single one of these videos. And I had a question that just came in from one of our viewers today, and they ask, has a solar flare ever knocked something out before? And that's a very interesting question that I don't truthfully know the answer to. I believe it has not, though I make sure you read up on it and look it up to confirm. But I do not believe that a solar flare has indeed knocked anything out before. From my understanding, there have been solar flares in history that were powerful enough to do so, but it was before we had the technology around to really be majorly affected by such a thing. These are similar. Solar flares and solar winds are very similar, or can be similar to how an EMP detonation, which is when you take a nuclear weapon and detonate it in the atmosphere, it knocks out an electrical equipment. From my understanding, it can do very similar things. So I hope that answers your question to the best of my ability. I would look it up yourself because I personally do not know the answer, but 100%, but I do not believe it did occur. And with that, actually, that is the end of this segment. So if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more of it and you would like to follow the news and get regular updates, don't forget to like and subscribe. That really helps us reach more people. It really helps us give the news in an unbiased way to more people, which I believe is something that the world really lacks in this day and age. And I would love to continue being able to do this and really show what's actually going on, and the whole team would like to continue this endeavor. But more importantly than that, it means that there will be more people here to raise more money for good causes. And we're not just going to focus on Ukraine the entire time. Once this war in Ukraine hopefully comes to a quick end, we'll focus on other things. There is currently food insecurities in Africa and other regions of the world. There have been malaria outbreaks in different regions of the world, such as the Southeast Asia. There are issues all over the place that we would like to focus on as well. And we'll have fundraisers for those areas as they become the main topics of the day as this war hopefully wraps up. So once again, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can do those kind of things and raise money and be a continued force for good in the world. Likewise, if you want to join the community, we have a very active community. There's also a really funny meme page on there. But like I had in the video today, there's a lot of people who find some really good information ongoing regarding a lot of these topics. We have everything broken down into different regions of the world. Join us on Discord. The link is in the description. You can check out those areas, join in on the chats, share the information that you're getting that people otherwise may not be getting. It might even end up on the stream for all you know if I see it. So go ahead, join us there if you would like. And that's going to be it. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day, their evening, their morning, whatever and whenever you are. And I hope that you and your family remain safe in the ongoing within the next day. And I will see you guys again tomorrow for our next daily update regarding the 24 hours of worldwide news and special coverage on the Ukrainian war. So I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.